Hey guys. I think Americans have a warped perception of our history of immigration, of other nations' immigration policies, and most importantly, of the grave consequences of unrestricted immigration, not just illegal immigration. This is going to be a two-parter because it was turning into a giant video. So today we'll take the first few of these issues and have a discussion of our immigration history and the widely held expectation that the United States maintain a more lax immigration policy than other countries, even those presently engaging in colonialism. I did make a video on America's basic immigration history, which is linked below, but I wanted to take a more philosophical approach to the discussion today. We're all constantly bombarded with this claim that we're a nation of immigrants and that we're just upholding this great American tradition with our present day immigration policy. This is, of course, demonstrably false, and like diversity is our strength, has become this platitudinous mantra employed by feeble minded drones as a proxy for a legitimate argument. Obviously, some Americans are actually descended of immigrants, particularly after immigration reform in 1965. But most Americans, the majority before well into the 19th century, could trace their lineage to some of the first Americans. My ancestry on both sides can be traced back to the early and mid 1600s. They came from England and formed the first colonies. This branch on my mom's side includes some of the earliest settlers in New Hampshire. There was virtually nothing there, and at great personal risk, they braved an arduous journey, came to a new land with nothing, and had to build a life worth living with their own hands. By definition, to qualify as an immigrant, you must arrive to an existing country with some sort of structure. An immigrant is a person who comes to a country to take up permanent residence, not to a plot of uncultivated land absent of infrastructure. And there was a clear distinction between immigrants and settlers in American history. This article, as always, is linked below. But were America's founders immigrants, as Kamala Harris claims? Perhaps the simplest answer is found in the evolution of the English language in America. The term immigrant did not come into usage in America until the 1780s to distinguish new arrivals from the founding settlers. Prior to the American Revolution, the English and the Dutch conceived of themselves as founders, settlers, or planters, the formative population of those colonial societies, not as immigrants. If the founders were immigrants, it would have been a tremendous surprise to them because they certainly did not conceive of themselves as such. By 1790, the population of the United States was 4 million, with the exception of a black minority and Indians. America was 60% ethnically English, 80% British, with Germans and the Dutch making up the remainder, and 98% Protestant. In 1797, John Jay noted specific attributes of American identity. In doing so, Jay did not simply adumbrate what makes an American, but made a distinction between settlers and immigrants. These are language, English, manners and customs, Anglo-Protestant, religion, Christianity, principles of government, British. Drawing from Huntington's exhaustive demographic research, we find that while European wars kept immigration to a crawl, the overall American population increased by 35% between 1790 and 1800, 36% between 1800 and 1810, and 82% between 1800 and 1820. Huntington attributes the population explosion to high birth rates and fertility rates among the native-born population. It's verifiable using historical records that the vast majority of Americans, at least before 1820, were direct descendants of founders whose hard work and ingenuity created this nation from nothing. They did not steal it, they did not come to it and assimilate, they created it. There was immigration between 1820 and 1924, but most of it was from Europe, and this time period included pauses to allow for assimilation. And remember, this was immigration from countries where the people were largely assimilable and at least shared European heritage with the founders. Even as such, there was significant strife between several European groups. This changed completely with the Hart-Celler Act in 1965, and I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow as well. Earlier quota systems based on national origin were abolished, and family reunification and attracting cheap labor became the focus. Naturally, this brought waves of Asian and Latin American immigrants. Additionally, unlike previous policy, there was no respite for assimilation, which would already be more difficult because of disparate cultural values and racial allegiances. The foreign-born population was always quite low, another reason that this nation of immigrants thing is bullshit, and until 1965 was almost completely composed of Europeans. Since, our foreign born population has risen again, with the lion's share coming from countries with which we share no culture or heritage. Within 35 years, America experienced as much immigration as it did in an entire century. And now, politicians and the left are demanding that this be the rule, in perpetuity, not the exception, as it clearly has been from a historical perspective. History has been rewritten so that the founders and their descendants were merely immigrants as well. As such, those that built this country have lost their claim to it, even more so as the left pushes for additional waves of immigrants to edge out their descendants. This, paired with relentless propaganda, especially in school regarding the founders' racism, has been extremely effective in diminishing this concept of rightful ownership and even of national sovereignty. There are many reasons that the left did this, which I won't go into at length today. Some of it is to secure a future voting bloc. Some of it is to destabilize the nation through multiculturalism so that it's ripe for chaos and a power grab. Some of it is that the communist left has outright disdain for Western civilization and white men. And some of it is due to this warped idea that we have to pay back the rest of the world for our history of colonialism. Let's talk a little bit about the Chinese in Africa, although their global expansion is massive. Sensing that Africa had been cast aside by the West in the wake of the Cold War, Beijing saw the continent as the perfect proving ground for some Chinese companies to cut their teeth in international business. It certainly did not hurt that Africa was also the repository of an immense share of global resources, raw materials that were vital both for China's extraordinary ongoing industrial expansion and for its across-the-board push for national reconstruction. The long arm of globalization had touched Africa. Trade between China and the second continent of Africa reached close to $300 billion in 2015. Chinese corporations are all over Africa. In June 2017, a McKinsey & Company report estimated that there are more than 10,000 Chinese-owned firms operating in Africa. What are Chinese corporations doing in Africa? That's a highly controversial issue. To exploit the people and take their resources. It's the same thing European colonists did during mercantile times, except worse. The Chinese corporations are trying to turn Africa into another Chinese continent. They're squeezing Africa for everything it's worth. Moral issues aside, European colonialism, although profit was certainly important, if not the most important aspect, also had this dimension of paternalism, and I don't mean that in the pejorative sense. They often saw impoverished nations as unable to effectively self-govern and thought that they could bring a way of life to them that would improve their well-being, and they did in many cases. I don't think that the Chinese are considering this at all. America is expected to take in the world's poor because of a general history of colonialism, not specific to the nation of origin of the third world migrants that are flooding our country, because reasons. So based on the left's upstanding, superior moral code, it stands to reason that the Chinese should be taking in tons of poor Africans. And if they aren't, we should demand it, right? It's hard to get a number of the permanent Africans residing in the entire country. But in Guangzhou, thought to be one of the most African-dense cities in the nation, high estimates over the last few years have been around 60,000. Now it seems that there are around 10,000 Africans left in this city, and this number is dwindling. For the most part, the Chinese keep Africans out of their country, despite extracting resources from their countries, establishing thousands upon thousands of businesses there, and an estimated 1 million Chinese taking up permanent residence in various African nations. Why? Because by the left's own standards, they're racist. Guangzhou sits 75 miles northwest of Hong Kong. Africans began pouring into this landscape of factories, producing everything from washing machines to fake Levi's jeans in the mid-90s. China's economy had recently opened up, and in 2000, Beijing hosted the first Forum on China-African Cooperation, spearheading a campaign to court good relations with resource-rich African nations. Many Chinese residents do not want to live in Africatown due to differences ranging from culture to lifestyle to hygiene, an American diplomat wrote to Washington, citing research commissioned by the local authorities. It sounds like it's the same all over China. They view Africans as inferior intellectually and culturally and do not want them in China due to their perceived criminality, the diseases that they're said to carry, and fears of demographic change. In March 2016, a politician proudly shared with reporters his proposal on how to solve the problem of the black population in Guangdong. The province is widely known in China to have many African migrants. Africans bring many security risks. As a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the nation's top political advisory body, he urged the government to strictly control the African people living in Guangdong and other places. Black brothers often travel in droves. They are out at night, out on the streets, nightclubs, and remote areas. They engage in drug trafficking, harassment of women, and fighting, which seriously disturbs law and order. Africans have a high rate of AIDS and the Ebola virus that can be transmitted via body fluids. If their population keeps growing, China will change from a nation state to an immigration country, from a yellow country to a black and yellow country. This attitude that immigration, especially from third world countries, is necessary recompense for colonialism is strictly applied to the United States and Europe. I never hear leftists talk about China needing to take millions of poor Africans. It has nothing to do with the truth of colonialism or with possessing legitimately racist attitudes, which America clearly does not. Can you imagine if any American politician or media personality repeated word for word what was said by that Chinese politician? Juxtapose it with the statement that just got Megyn Kelly fired. It's laughable. It's extremely important that Americans understand the essence of our former immigration policies, why they worked, and how we effectively utilized immigration quotas to maintain peace and cultural integrity. It illuminates how preposterous and destructive our immigration system has become. It's also important that Americans examine why we're being treated differently than other countries, why only Western nations are expected to take on the world's poor. I'm going to wrap this one up, but I'm not done. Tune in tomorrow for a discussion of the unforeseen but totally predictable consequences of our immigration policies. Thanks, folks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.